Welcome to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I am your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. I am so excited to share about our 2024 virtual MTSS Summit happening this December. It's a 2-day event filled with MTSS inspiration and practical strategies you can start using immediately. Join hundreds of educators from across the country and the world to explore MTSS fidelity in action. And we are excited to offer a giveaway for our podcast listeners. Share your biggest aha moment from today's episode in our latest LinkedIn post and win a free pass to our summit for yourself or a colleague. Now for today's episode. Just like when you have the flu, doctors have a standard set of prescriptions that they start with before trying something different. And in education, it is no different. A standard treatment protocol makes it so much easier to support students holistically. And today, I have friend of the podcast, Krissy Martin, back on the show today to tell us a little bit about how her district is using standard treatment protocols and how it's helping. Welcome, Krissy.
Thank you, Larissa. I'm happy to be back on the show.
Well, we're glad to have you back. So, Krissy, I know you've been on the podcast before, but maybe tell maybe some new listeners a little bit about yourself and your district and your position, and then maybe share your favorite routine that you have in your life.
My name is Krissy Martin, and I currently serve as the director of MTSS in its section of children in Ronald Crafts Graded School District, which is a district of about 2,800 students, pre-K through 12, in northeastern North Carolina. I've also served as a classroom teacher, a coordinator for gifted education, beginning teachers, professional development, and testing and accountability. One of my favorite routines is to create a to-do list each day, each week, and then to categorize all of my action items as urgent, can wait, or not necessary. And I'll tell you, I'm one of those people who would add something to my to-do list to check it out, check it off, even if it's already been done. Really helped me because a lot of times if it's on my list, I feel like I have to get it done, but some things really don't have to be done or they can wait. So prioritizing that list.
Well, Krissy, thank you so much for being here. And, standard treatment protocols and problem solving protocols are a key component of the MTSS framework. But I know that they serve different purposes. Can you
Mhm.
maybe explain the difference between the two and how you decided to approach which approach to use for the students with varying needs?
Okay, so essentially, a standard treatment protocol is a one size fits most. This approach is suitable for students with common difficulties that you might see across the board and across various domains, whether that's in academics, attendance, behavior. But the problem solving protocol is a little different because that is custom tailored. That's when the thing that you're using that works for most students does not work. So just let's take a painkiller. Most people, hey, I have a headache, so I'm going to take some form of painkiller, whether that's Tylenol, Aleve, uh, Bayer, whatever you're going to take. For most people, their headache will eventually dissipate. However, there are some people who can't just take a painkiller. For those individuals, they might need a cold compress, gentle massage. So they need something different, something that doesn't work for everyone. And so what we do is we always start with our standard treatment protocol. We're going to try this because it's proven to work, right? Through repetition. We've used this approach several times when students struggle with decoding, for example. However, when we determine that what we are using in our standard treatment protocol does not work for that individual or small group of students, then we use the problem solving protocol.
I like that analogy of for most things, this headache medicine will work, but if it's something more severe,
Mhm.
you have to try something different. And I think that a lot of times, and we say that with like tier one, most that might work with most kids. But when you come to that intervention, having sort of like, well, now here's the standard set of what we should try next. I think
Mhm,
that makes it so much easier for decisions. It's not, you're not trying to like just pull out of thin air a new
mhm.
solution. So, interventions are such a critical piece of supporting students. Can you maybe share some examples of your research based interventions that you use in your standard treatment protocol? And maybe talk about how those interventions have like proven effective for students with similar challenges.
Okay, so when we think about standard treatment protocols, there is some resource mapping that is required first. You have to know what you have in your toolkit or your toolbox that you can use. And so some of our tools or resources are Wonders, it's a K-5 reading curriculum, M-Class, 95% phonics core program, and UFly. So what we've done, and I'll just say this, building a standard treatment protocol takes time. And the reason it takes time is because you have to ensure that it works. So you try it one time, you should be able to replicate it. So this is something we've done over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. And essentially what we do is systematically and explicitly implement programs. So we use our data, we have like universal screening, and then we identify gaps. Once we identify the gaps, we know that, hey, for a student, for example, 95% phonics, I'll use that. Um, that provides explicit phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. So we know that if we're going to focus on decoding, blending, and multisensory activities, then this is one of our go-tos. And for most students, that will work. And then we say, okay, well, all students aren't responding to 95% phonics, then we might use UFly. So it depends on what the issue is. Just like going back to our analogy with a headache, you may not treat a cold and flu the same way that you do a headache. You need something different. So once we identify what the problem is or where the gaps are, then we have in place some things that have been tried and true for us for closing those achievement gaps.
Okay, so what you're saying is that in once you've done the universal screening, you've determined that a student needs more interventions, you're going to use that set of programs or set
Mm-hmm.
of different types of interventions. And then that's when, if that isn't working, then you move on to the problem solving protocol, sort of to
Yes.
diagnose and more
Mm-hmm.
intensive support. Do you
Yes.
feel like that the teachers, how do you involve the teachers in that process? So, because they're on the front lines of, implementing MTSS, how
Mm-hmm.
do you involve them in sort of deciding those programs or deciding the type of standard treatment protocol you use?
Well, we know that the teachers have the day to day interaction with the students. So we meet regularly. We have PLCs based on the grade level or the department. And during that time, the teachers provide insights based on the resources that they've used. They share the challenges and practical applications for interventions. So we need their valuable insight to make determinations. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes we know that we have a need for a resource, and I mean, I can go online and Google, phonics programs for elementary students, but we actually allow our teachers to vet the programs. Say, hey, we're going to use this for 6 months or 3 months. Try it out, give us some feedback, and then we'll make a determination. So whenever we adopt for instance, we adopted a new math curriculum. It wasn't a 1 year process. It was a 2 year process. And I mean, there are various stages, but it's the same thing even with programs like 95% phonics, or, if we're going to pay for additional components of M class or even with Wonders. Have you tried this? Yes. And then where's the data to support that it works or that it works for most students? So the teachers provide us insight. This is what I like about this. This is what I don't like about it. And then we use that information to make informed decisions about our purchases.
Yeah. Do you feel like that helps with the teachers, sort of the implementation and the usage of those types of programs?
Yes, it creates buy-in. And I just want to add this. It's not that everyone has to use the same thing. Again, the analogies we're using with medicine make this relevant and more easily digestible. But again, whether it's Tylenol or Aleve, right? They may both work. So if teacher A says, "Hey, Tylenol has proven to be beneficial or impactful in my class," and someone else says Aleve or Advil, that's fine as long as you're getting the results.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I do think that sometimes it has to do with teacher preference or just
Mm-hmm,
even their sort of demeanor and how they like to implement an intervention. I mean, I as an educator, I totally understand that sentiment,
mm-hmm,
and I really love that you get that feedback from teachers
mm-hmm.
because I do think that they're the ones who are going to be using the program. So instead of sort
Yes.
of like kind of arbitrarily making a decision about a program of like, oh, it is research based or supported, but having your teachers actually give that input gives ownership to them, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like that buy-in for their participation. And I think that that really helps that collective efficacy
Yes,
of
indeed.
your work. Yeah. So thinking about this is that sometimes students don't always respond to the
Mm-hmm.
intervention that way we hope. Maybe it has worked with a lot of other students, but there's a student that isn't responding. When you find that a group of students or a student isn't making that progress with a standard treatment protocol, so then talk about that process for deciding to intensify their support or trying a different approach. What factors guide you in making that call?
So again, I want to go back to identifying the problem. If I go in and something's wrong with my knee and my doctor is treating me for my ear, then of course I'm not going to see any progress, right, with my knee because the problem is not being addressed. So with our standard treatment protocol, the first thing we want to ensure is that we know the cause of the gap, or we know the cause of the deficit. And once we are sure that we've identified that, or at least narrowed it down, and we implement the standard treatment protocol, we use that data. If let's just say a student is making progress, but not really the progress we want to see, then we might say, okay, yes, we need to intensify because this is working, but it's not giving us exactly. So instead of taking one Tylenol, I might need to take two, right? And so that's the first thing that we do. We change the dosage, right? The frequency. We were meeting with this student 2 times a week for 20 minutes. Maybe now we need to do 4 times a week for 25 minutes. And after that, we do have to consider the implementer. So if there are 5 teachers and it's not working in one classroom, then we may need to look at the fidelity or integrity of that implementation. We consider the attendance. Sometimes we don't look across multiple domains. We just say the student isn't making adequate progress, and then we take a closer look. The student hasn't been in school, or the student was in school, but they were in the office or they were called out for another reason. So just looking at all the things surrounding the implementation. Was the student there? Was the teacher there or the interventionist or whoever is providing that service? And then when the intensified support doesn't work, then we know that it may be necessary to actually change the intervention. So now we need something more than what we've been doing or something different. So we don't change to something different until after we've been intensified, unless we get some new data to, show that that's not the problem. But we intensify and then we change the intervention.
Man, I love the way that you kind of laid this out. So it really does make it simple to sort of say, like, we do this step, then this step, then this step. Do you feel like that clarification has really helped sort of the efficiency of making these decisions, or even just as your team meets and like you have to make these decisions? Does it just help it move this process quicker?
It definitely does because a lot of times when students are experiencing deficits, the teachers say, we don't know what to do, right? Or it's just too many students with the same issue, which I will say that we can't intervene on a on a we cannot intervene on a faulty core, and we cannot tier two our way out of a core problem. So with that being said, um, we have something that is, again, systematic, something that is explicit, something that we can progress monitor. And then we say, hey, do this and then do that. And if a certain percentage of your students are not meeting the goal, then we say, okay, let's revisit the core. How can we strengthen the core? How can we differentiate to meet the needs of more students? Because you shouldn't have more tier two and more tier three students than you have tier one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. I mean, you can't tier two your way out of a tier one problem. You got to
Mhm,
like make sure that that foundation is solid. Um, I think that, collaboration is such a big part of MTSS and, so many different people are involved. How do
mhm.
you facilitate that smooth collaboration across teachers, interventionists, and administrators when rolling out a district-wide as standard treatment protocol? What systems or practices have worked really well for you?
Well, the first thing is we have to meet. Like we have to come together as a team, and the team consists of people from with school counselors, administrators, instructional coaches, representatives from different either content areas and grade levels. And when we meet together, we have discussions. So the first thing you have to do is meet. And one way to ensure that you meet is to have a standing meeting, whether that's the second Thursday of every month or it is the first Wednesday of every month. Put it on the calendar. If you need to make changes later, that's fine. So once we meet, we always have an agenda. What are we going to talk about? Because we want to maximize our time. We know that time is a very valuable commodity. So when we do come together, we want to stay focused. And then we have a set of norms. We want to be engaged. We want to be solution oriented. So the first thing is meeting. We also want to do something in between our meetings. So if we're going to leave a meeting, we know who's going to do what, by when, who they're going to turn it into. And then we continue to meet with our POCs. So there's ongoing PD and coaching and professional learning even between our meetings. So meeting with a purpose essentially is how we ensure like we have those district and school communication loops. So I'm at every meeting unless there's some, I'm not in the office or something, but every school-based MTSS meeting, I am there as a district representative. I share information, I bring back information, and we problem solve together. So
Yeah.
that's essentially how we keep those communication loops open.
Well, yeah, you're the help the kind of glue that
Mhm,
all together. I get that. So, I think it's important. I mean, something you mentioned is just that like the standard set of what are our action items? What are the things that
mhm,
we're going to do away from this meeting? Because you don't want to just talk around the problem. You actually want to like make things
mhm.
happen.
Yes.
So I was thinking that in the long run, I know the goal of MTSS and using a standard treatment protocol is to
Mhm.
close that achievement gap and to help every student succeed. So, how has using standard treatment protocols in your district really contributed to this? Like, could you maybe share a success story or something that you see where like this is making a difference?
Yes. So one thing that I think we're doing with this standard treatment protocol that is making a huge difference is we're responding in real time. So we know that what we're using should work for most students. And when it's not working for most students, we realize that it may be an issue with implementation, not the intervention itself. So we can more easily identify that, hey, this isn't necessarily an intervention issue. It may be related to implementation. In addition to that, when we get the results, we are more keen to say, hey, listen, this worked for, you know, 4 out of 5 students. So I know that this student needs something different, but when you try that something different and it works, that also becomes a part of your next steps. So next year, when you get a student and it doesn't work for that one student or 2 students, you already have a next go to. So here are a couple of things that we are celebrating in our district. The first thing is that our district outpaced the state, so the state of North Carolina, in growth in K3 literacy, according to our DIBELS 8 data. So that is in every grade K3 and every subgroup. So we are celebrating that, this amazing progress. We attribute a lot of that to letters, the training that we had, statewide training, and the diligence of our teachers and our administrators saying, hey, this is what we need to do for these students who are still struggling. So we're excited about that. Something else that we are celebrating is that for the first time since 2022, or probably maybe 2021, but I came on in 2022, so I'm using that as my reference point. Our district has tiered students using composite scores and not skills in reading. Now, that may not mean a lot to anyone else, but just for a little background, what we were doing is we were using Branch and Minds to tier our students for reading, the support that they will receive. And we know that the ideal triangle has 80%, for tier one, and then you have 10 to 15% for tier two, and then 5% or less for tier three. Well, in order to make our group sizes manageable, we would use skills to tier our students with. So we might choose phonemic awareness or, you know, text comprehension. We would choose something else because we needed our numbers to be small enough that we could serve those students. Well, now we just use the overall composite score, and whatever we get is what we get. And for the first time, it is as close to the triangle, ideal triangle, than it has ever been.
Oh my gosh, Krissy, that's amazing news. Like, I think that
Yes.
it's just a proof that your hard work and sort of
Mm-hmm.
your diligence in your teamwork and all of that stuff is making such a big difference. And I love sort of you sharing those things of just sort of like that is the results that we hope for, right? When we
Yes.
work hard to develop the standard treatment protocol. I also want to go back to something you said about how you're basically developing new other standard treatment protocol from
Mm-hmm.
sort of research that you're doing of like when this doesn't work, we try this. And then you have kind of are broadening your set of like, these are some things
Mm-hmm.
we can try. And
Yes.
that's a great answer for teachers of like, I don't know what to do,
Mm-hmm.
what's next. So I love that. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that all of the hard work that you're doing. So any last advice that you would have for a district that's trying to like lay out your standard treatment protocol and what they should do to get it started?
Yes. So what I will say is it's a process. It takes time. It takes years. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. Um, so be patient with yourself, show yourself grace, and also support your colleagues. So if you're in a district role like I am in, then support your colleagues. Try to foster collaboration amongst the different schools. So our elementary schools, let's come together. Let's talk. What's working for you? What's working for you? And then we even look at grade levels. What's working in kindergarten that maybe first grade might be able to do. So that vertical alignment piece is important as well. But I will say that show yourself some grace, understand that it takes time, and it's an ever evolving process. Like we are so much further than we've ever been, but we know that we have not arrived because guess what happens? Over time, the state may move the bar, right? And what was expected for proficiency this year may not be the same, in a couple of years. And then adopt new we may adopt a new curriculum. We get different resources. We have teacher turnover. We have administrator turnover. I'm here now. I mean, I don't have any plans to leave, but when a person leaves any role that has the potential to um, require you to go back to the drawing board because now you have to fill in the gaps and continue or ensure that continuity. So with that being said, it's a process and you just deal with things as they come. you know you build
Yeah.
capacity in the teachers so that if one person does leave, it's no problem, you can still keep going.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Krissy. And I know you shared a bunch of great resources that I'm going to add to our show notes.
Mhm.
And we just appreciate
Yes.
hearing all about what's happening at Roanoke Rapids in North
Mhm.
Carolina. And we just thank you for all of your hard work and your time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Larissa. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Branching Minds.